I'm gonna show you how to cut the onion. Now, this side that I just cut off was just this end here. So we're gonna keep the root intact. I'm gonna warn you, I learned when I went to culinary school that when you cut through the root, that's when it makes your eyes really cry pretty hard. So be prepared for some watery, teary eyes. So now I'm just taking the onion and I am peeling it. I get rid of the first layer of the onion. I'm going to show you just, one half, demonstrating by telling you about it. And then the next half you guys are gonna see by me speeding up the video. So I'm actually gonna turn so you can see better. I hope that my hand's not gonna get in the way. So technically when you cut an onion, you wanna cut in through the onion this direction. You want a nice sharp knife and you don't want your fingers to get in the way. Now I'm actually gonna show you, I'm gonna show you two different ways to do this because I've come up with an easier way to cut the onion in the sense that you don't have to fear cutting your fingers. So we cut our slices this way. Now we're gonna cut some slices going this direction. So I'm turning the onion just a little bit, which might not be the greatest angle for you, but I am cutting this direction. And the reason I kept the root intact of the onion is to help hold the onion together so it doesn't fall apart. See right here, this part's falling apart because it's not attached to the root. So I can just hold it together carefully, of course, so you don't cut yourself. So now we're going to take it and we're going to cut this direction. So this is just dicing the onion for you. Pretty simple. Once you get to the root, we are done. So that's not too terrible. And you have all of your little diced pieces. Look how beautiful that is. And if something doesn't dice up, like this one here, you just take it and dice it up, keeping your fingers obviously out of the way. There we go. And this one didn't dice up great either. That is one way of dicing your onion. The other way is a method that my mom uses, and it was quite ingenious if you ask me. So we're going to cut through the root just a little bit so you can see it's still intact to some extent. Peeling off that first layer of onion. So now, instead of cutting this way, I'm going to take it and I'm going to cut it this direction. See, I'm still cutting towards the root, but now I'm not going to accidentally cut my fingers because they're completely 100% out of the way. And the reason I'm so adamant about not cutting it the other way is because I was that person back in culinary school who cut through the tip of her thumb doing this method of the other one. So I really don't want any accidents here. So we're still doing the same thing, this is now exactly the same as what we did before with the other method. So simply cutting more of the root off is to giving you a flat surface so it doesn't wobble around was really the only difference between the two. Now, you just cut up the rest of the root. Get rid of this root piece and that root piece. So now we have our onion all diced up and ready to go. we are going to start cooking up our ground beef. I'm going to light the pan or heat the pan up to about medium high. I'm going to continually take the meat and just chop it up with my turner. I want this meat to look like itty bitty pieces of like rice kernels. I've seen in the past where people don't chop it up and they leave it in just a ball and it burns terribly. So do make sure you are just constantly chopping it up. You can go this direction, you can go this direction. You just want it to look itty bitty. I'm sure you guys have all seen ground beef that has been cooked and chopped up. So you have to work your meat. There we go. Some more light. Also take your ground beef, get underneath it, flip it. You don't want to use a wooden spoon because of the raw juices. You don't want those raw juices get in the grain of the wooden spoon. And we're going to cook this until we no longer see any pink. Notice that my continually chopping this is getting it nice and small. We're not burning. If you're burning your meat, your flame is too high. Or your electric coil if you're on gas or electric. Oh boy. Okay. I no longer see any pink, so I am going to drain the grease. In my handy dandy strainer, not colander because the holes are too big and I'd lose all of my meat, I'm just going to take my meat and carefully put it in my strainer. Get all of that grease. If we were at the high school, we would have this being drained into a communal pot at the ingredient table. Now I'm using my turner to press all the remaining grease out of here. We don't want this to go down the drain of the sink because it can clog the drain, and your parents, or if you were at the high school, myself, would not be too happy. So I am going to take this grease once it cools down, and I can put it in the garbage can, but I can't do that until it cools down. So I am going to move this aside. We are done with it. I already pre-measured my 1/3 cup of chili and my taco seasoning in the water. I do have here a tablespoon because we're going to add 1/8 of a cup of onions to the meat. Now, again, we talked about this during the recipe read over. If you don't want onions in your meat, you don't have to add the onions. And the reason why I'm using a tablespoon is because we know that 2 tablespoons is 1/8 of a cup. Now, I'm an onion fan, so I'm going to add more. You can add more ingredients. You don't have to follow this recipe perfectly. So now that everything's cooked, I'm actually going to change to a rubber scraper because I love how flexible this is, and it's so easy to maneuver my onions and meat around the pan. Actually, I'm going to add more onion because I think I love onion, guys. I love it. More onion, the better. We're going to add our seasoning to this. I'm going to mix this up again because it has settled since the last time I mixed it. And we're just going to add it. Now I'm going to use my rubber scraper to kind of mix it all around, get it all coated. This is the homemade taco seasoning that I referred to. So this is really, really, really powerful and strong. So you really don't need to use much. So I had a teaspoon added to 1/4 cup of water. If you're using store-bought, you'd want to use about a tablespoon. Obviously, if you're using more than 1/4 pound of meat, you would want more taco seasoning. In fact, if you love taco seasoning, you can simply sprinkle it on top as well. The water just helps the taco seasoning that we added to the water get into all the nooks and crannies of that meat. So in my homemade version, which you saw at the beginning of this video, you notice there isn't any salt. I like to be able to control the salt that goes into my recipe. So I'm actually going to add some salt and pepper to this also. This is not part of the recipe, adding the salt and pepper, but a savory cook, we can kind of do as we please as long as we don't overdo it. Like, I didn't put a ton of salt in there. I can taste it later and add more. Same with the taco seasoning. I can always add more. The reason I didn't add the onions to the meat when it was raw, and I said this in the recipe read over, is because those raw juices get into the onions, and then the onions have to be 165 degrees before they are safe to consume, so that you won't get E. coli if your meat happens to be contaminated. That bacteria, E. coli, is killed by the heat of cooking. Now I'm going to add my chili meat and my Catalina dressing. Get that rubber scraper out. Now I love putting chili meat in my taco meat. My husband's not a fan. But you know what? He just texted me and said he's going to be late for dinner. So you know what? That chili meat's going in there. Sorry. I think it adds more flavor. Now the Catalina dressing, oh my gosh, it gives this, well, basically Catalina dressing is French dressing with a little bit of a zing to it. So it gives it a little bit of sweetness, turning the heat down. And it also gives it that little bit of tangy zing. It's delicious. I have written in here that you put 2 tablespoons in here. I'm putting in the amount that I want in my taco meat. Oh, this just makes it so delicious. So now, this is kind of saucy. The juices have evaporated, which is good because we wanted the water to evaporate, leaving the taco flavor of the taco seasoning. But now that I've added the Catalina dressing and the chili meat, I'm going to let it just cook on low for a little bit. Now I can taste this and decide what else I want to add to it, or I can simply be done. Another thing that I like to add to my meat, which is not part of your recipe, is a little bit of salsa. Just a little bit. It's delicious, guys. You're like, Catalina dressing and salsa? Trust me, it's amazing and wonderful. So now I'm just going to let this simmer on the back burner. soon. I am turning on my pre-cooked shredded chicken. You guys saw this with the cheesy chicken casserole. I took a bunch of chicken breasts, stuck it in my pressure cooker, and just cooked it up to shred it so I can use it for a bunch of different things. I am just showing this to you for fun because I 100% love chicken tacos. So you can also have a little bit of fun with chicken. If you don't want to make beef taco salad, you can make chicken taco salad. And guys, I'm not measuring. This isn't even a recipe. This is just something that I make myself for fun. So we're going to add salsa, which I'm going to add more of. Yes, lots of salsa. We're going to add taco seasoning. Again, this is my homemade stuff, so you can't go insane with it. It kind of looks like I am probably in the video because I was sprinkling vigorously. Probably think a lot is coming out of here, but it's not. The holes are really small in that little canister, and like barely anything was coming out. So we obviously are going to have to taste test our meat. Come over here, check on the beef. At this point, it's mostly evaporated, so I'm going to turn this off, and it's ready to use. So just focusing on this delicious chicken meat. You can taste test this as you go. Make sure it's coming out the way you want it to. Catalina is always good, no matter what you're making. Must have used a lot in that ground beef. That's okay. There's more where that came from. I could put onions in this too, but I generally just use raw onions when I eat my tacos or taco salad, because this is a taco salad, which may or may not also be turned into a taco later. So very versatile. I can use it for my taco salad, and I can also use it in a tortilla or a taco shell for tacos later. Look how delicious this is looking, guys. Yummy. So we'll add some salt and pepper to this as well. There we go. When I add this to my taco salad, I like to add tomatoes, fresh tomatoes to it. I like to add guacamole, sour cream. It's just so delicious. Now, we shall taste test it. You grab a fork. I'm only going to use it once. No double dipping. You know, food safety. So I'm going to grab a little bit of taco meat. Chicken taco meat, that is. We're blowing on it right now because it's a little bit hot. Needs more taco seasoning. You can also use some more salsa. Mix it around real good. You see why I like to use that rubber scraper. It gets along the sides of the pan really nicely. Now, of course, you can't do this with a rubber scraper if it's not heat proof. This rubber scraper specifically is heat proof up to 400 degrees, so it's not going to melt. I've seen some rubber scrapers that just melt the moment it touches a pan. So don't do this with your mom's good rubber scrapers that aren't heat proof. Okay, grabbing another spoon, or fork actually, because I, called it the wrong thing. We're going to try this out again. Just a little bit. No. No. Yes. More Catalina. Actually, I'm going to take this, since it's basically out, and I'm going to pour a little bit of water in it, shake it out, and put the rest of it in here. See, my taco meat was tasting very savory, which I love. And of course the salsa has that unique flavor that is salty, and savory, and delicious. But I was needing a little bit of sweet. So that Catalina is just going to give me that little bit of sweet. Alright, let's take another taste. New fork again. We don't want my saliva to start digesting anything in this pan by double dipping. Perfect. Has a little kick to it from the taco seasoning, but it is delicious. We are done. Look how easy that was. Didn't take me long at all to make. So we have 2 different meats.